Any hateful thoughts towards the abuser makes him more abusive. Any judgmental thoughts towards the murderer makes him more murderous. In heart-based consciousness, we intuitively know that my thoughts about people affect them. Whether you judge outwardly or if you just keep that thought to yourself, the result is the same. It's an attack upon who you are. The universe is already living under perfect, immutable laws that make sure nobody can escape their karma. It'll come in a way you'll never expect it. The way you're choosing to see anyone is determining how much awareness you will have of spiritual reality. You want to be tapped into the field? You want to have strong intuition and psychic awareness, clairvoyance, clairsentience? Then you better stop judging. All right, let's dive into today's lesson. So some of you guys saw the post that I put out in the group, just kind of asking you guys what subjects you all want to hear me speak more about. And it seemed like a pretty overwhelming consensus on heart-based consciousness, which I'm very happy to hear. And that's the whole purpose of what we're doing here in 4D University, is to learn how to access and live from heart-based consciousness rather than ego consciousness. And so I want to give you guys what I believe is the most important key, the most important practice for really getting into the heart today. And let's begin by saying that the heart alone is able to see oneness and unity. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, it just ended up rhyming. The heart alone can see oneness and unity. The mind alone sees form and objects, right? So the recipe for ego consciousness is to view reality only through the mind without an awakened heart center. Because again, the mind, or the third chakra, which makes up our personal sense of self and our social self, the egoic self that we project outwardly, the self that we project to get attention, approval, love, validation. That's the egoic self, yeah? And without the heart center being active, the red, orange, and yellow triad of lower three chakras do not have the capacity to see or perceive oneness. They can only perceive the separate forms in the universe and live as a separate form. So the mind needs the heart, and we know this full well here, right? So this combination of viewing reality only and always through the mind and not having an awakened heart pretty much guarantees that the mind will be stuck in separation consciousness until an awakening of the heart begins. And so that begs the question, what prevents the heart from awakening? What prevents the heart from activating? And there's a few things we might say, but to get the most accurate and specific answer possible, I would say it's simply judgment or judgments. Judgments in our perception darken our awareness of spiritual reality, right? When the heart is active, we cannot judge people. We cannot feel judgment towards others because the heart is able to perceive the fear and the brokenness and the pain behind somebody's actions. The heart recognizes these things, right? The heart recognizes the pain that's driving people to do harm to others, to sin and to, act out evil deeds towards others. The heart chakra recognizes the pain, the fear, the turmoil, the anguish behind their actions, and therefore judgment is futile. It's just simply a fact. This person's full of pain. This person's full of spiritual ignorance and blindness. And so it can't be argued with. What's the point of judging? Judging's utterly futile and a waste of time from that awareness. But again, without that heart chakra activated, the mind cannot have that awareness. It can only see sin and evil, which deserves punishment and wrath. And the mind acts out that punishment through attack thoughts, right? Judgmental thoughts. And that, more than anything, you guys, is what constricts and darkens the heart chakra from awakening. So if we're trying to awaken the heart, we must begin this quest, this crusade, if you will, of purifying all judgments from our mind, purifying all judgment towards others from our perception. And so, when you judge, when you feel a judgment towards someone, you can notice that there's a contraction felt inside. Think back, if you haven't judged someone recently, think back to the last time you really felt a harsh judgment. And this could be something as simple as somebody really cut you off in traffic or something. You had to slam on your brakes. Maybe you spilled your coffee, I don't know, but somebody made a foolish move driving in front of you and you had to slam your brakes on, and then, you kind of pound the steering wheel and, "You idiot, you almost got me killed," and you feel that kind of harsh anger. Capture that moment, capture that state of being that you embody in that moment. It's immensely contracted, isn't it? It's extremely tight and rigid and, angry, judgmental. When you feel harshly towards others, judging them to be wrong or inferior in some way, your state of being shrinks and you lower your available energy in that moment. So how can that ever be a net positive for you? It's always an attack upon yourself, isn't it? To think a negative thought, an attack thought, a judgmental thought, it always lowers your vibration first. I sometimes like to say, the lightning bolt of judgment, which you summon from the heavens to strike somebody with, that lightning bolt of judgment passes through my body first before it gets to your body. I'm the conduit. I'm the judger. Where else can judgment come from other than me? I am making myself the source of judgment. And judgment is a negative energy, so I'm making myself the source of negative energy. How can that ever be a win? And furthermore, with judgment, it's also very helpful to see the kind of just futility of it from a very masculine, logical, rational framework. It's kind of like seeing somebody else in pain and, smashing your thumb with a hammer to empathize with them. It's like, I'm going to lower myself to your level in order to empathize with you, which of course doesn't help you or them in any way. Somebody who's in pain doesn't feel better because you're in pain. They just care about their pain. They want to be alleviated from their pain. My dad used to say, and still says, unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Right? Because it's an attack upon yourself. So when you judge, you think that you're helping the situation by harming yourself, essentially. In the ego's mind, if a judgment is not passed on someone who's deemed to be doing evil, then it's as good as if we approve of their evil. In the ego's mind, right? The ego says, if you don't show your judgment about this person right now, you're complicit. You're just as bad as they are. You need to show the universe how much you detest evil and sin. That's the ego's logic, right? And it seems to make sense from the ego's frame of reference. But when we understand oneness, it turns that upside down and it makes no sense. If we don't demonstrate our condemnation of people, we think that God is somehow going to not know that we don't approve of their evil deeds. That sounds pretty separative, doesn't it? I'm pretty sure God's in your mind already. Pretty sure God's omnipresent in your consciousness at all times and knows exactly what you think about everything. So you don't need to show God that you disapprove of someone's evil deeds by judging them. That's the ego's logic in separation. It's utterly insane to believe that harming yourself or harming someone else can result in a positive. Something good will come of me judging in my mind. Whether you judge outwardly and you let them know you think they're a scumbag or whatever, or if you just keep that thought to yourself, the result is the same. It's an attack upon who you are, right? It is a darkening of your awareness, of your perception that blinds you to spiritual reality. But on the other hand, the refusal to judge, the absolute refusal to judge another person for their misdeeds, is simply the refusal to add more evil to the situation, isn't it? Someone who's living from heart-based consciousness who, no matter what they might witness someone doing, abusing children even, right? That never does a moment arise where they even consider judging the person who's doing it, because it's a completely futile waste of time and energy, and it only adds more negativity to the situation. Why? Because when we live in heart-based consciousness, as we said, the heart alone can see oneness. The heart alone perceives unity. And so in heart-based consciousness, we intuitively know that my thoughts about people affect them, whether for good or for evil. If I think a negative thought about someone, I'm basically sending them negative energy. And if they're in agreement to any extent with my judgments about them, it will increase that negative energy in them. Of course, somebody who's totally crystallized and purified will not be affected by the judgments of others, because there's no anchor point for negative energy to land in them. Negative energy needs an anchor point in someone to attach itself. And if you're purified of all distortions, you're invisible to anger. You're invisible to negativity, rather. It goes right through you, passes right through you. There's no landing point for it to attach itself to. This is why we say, if you spot it, you got it, right? What you judge in another person is what you're projecting about yourself. Meaning, if someone else's greed pisses me off, I've got some greed in myself for sure. For sure. Otherwise, it couldn't possibly annoy me in somebody else. I would see it only with compassion. I would recognize it for exactly what it is, right? So any hateful thoughts towards the abuser makes him more abusive. Any judgmental thoughts towards the murderer makes him more murderous. But likewise, the refusal to judge is also the refusal to suffer for imaginary reasons. I'm not going to make up enemies in my mind. This person is not my enemy. They're a divine brother or a divine sister who has lost their way, fallen into blindness and ignorance and delusion. They do not know unity. They do not know love. They do not know who they are. They may not even know that God exists. How or why could I possibly expect somebody who doesn't know who they are, who doesn't know their oneness with God, who doesn't perceive love? How could I possibly expect them to be living from heart-based consciousness? What foolishness, isn't it? What arrogance, what pride to expect others to live up to my standards of where I think they should be. No, they're just where they are, and it can't be argued with. Where somebody is can't be argued with. It's just a fact of the matter. So the refusal to judge others is a statement of allegiance to the divine power, isn't it? The refusal to judge anyone or anything, including yourself, is an acknowledgement of the perfect justice system God has already built into the universe. It's the intuitive knowing that all beings are already experiencing the full consequences of their actions. The consequences may not look how I think they should look or assume they might look. We always expect if somebody steals, they should be stolen from in the same manner, but the universe is way more creative in the way that it exacts karma on people. It'll come in a way you'll never expect it, for good reason, right? Because if someone's aware of the laws of karma, they can go around doing evil deeds to others and then make sure that they keep all of their money in a safe, behind a wall, perfectly protected, so there's no chance somebody can steal from them. And so the universe says, no problem, I'll have somebody steal your idea for that song you're writing, or, whatever. There's a new way. The universe can always exact the karma upon everyone. So I do not need to judge. I do not need to attempt to exact any measure of punishment on any sentient being, whether in my mind or in reality itself. God's justice is already exacted upon the universe, right? The universe is already living under perfect, immutable laws that make sure nobody can escape their karma. So why do I need to go around judging, lowering my energy, attacking myself, blinding myself to spiritual reality with all of these judgmental thoughts? If I meet someone and I blame him for his weakness, all I've done is to rob myself of the power to see higher knowledge. But if I try to enter lovingly into his true nature, into his light, if I try to lovingly see his light past the outward appearance, then I gain that power to see higher knowledge. So the way you're choosing to see anyone is determining how much awareness you will have of spiritual reality. You want to be tapped into the field? You want to have strong intuition and psychic awareness, clairvoyance, clairsentience? You want to experience all the powers of the heart chakra? Well, then you better stop judging, because judging, again, darkens your perception and shuts off the heart. The heart doesn't know judgment, right? The heart doesn't know how to push anything away. And so when we judge from those lower 3 chakras, those judgments come up, the heart says, sorry, can't process that. Leave it up to you guys, have fun with it. I don't judge, I can't judge. But if we do the opposite, we ask the heart to grace and bless the lower 3 chakras with its loving awareness, then what the heart chakra does is it exalts the lower 3 triad, the lower 3 ego chakras. It exalts them to their highest expression, and they become instruments of love and service and devotion. So we have to start seeing this, right? That there is a much higher dimension of awareness available to us, which is far more intelligent, far more harmonious, and happy than ego consciousness. But judgments in our perception, however subtle they may be, are like chains that bind us to a third density consciousness. The judgments in our perception dampen our ability to see eternal truth, even when it's right in front of us. You know, we have God in human form standing right in front of us. We have the divine being itself in one of its many expressions, and we're just seeing hatred and judgment. I mean, how much darker can you get? How much farther from truth can you fall? So we overlook the importance of this, right? And this is why I'm such a huge fan of ACIM, is that ACIM teaches this as the exclusive pathway to heaven, right? ACIM teaches that forgiveness is the path to heaven because forgiveness asks us to love and cherish the person right in front of us as the Christ itself. And as we see the Christ in others, the doors to heaven blast wide open for us to walk right through. Meaning if I affirm the divine principle in anything else outside of me, if I affirm it in you, I have affirmed it in myself. And if I deny it in you, I've denied it in myself. So forgiveness, when we live and walk from forgiveness, we are demonstrating this higher way of consciousness, which doesn't try to take matters into its own hands, right? But it surrenders everything to God. And in being able to forgive others, you relinquish all trust and power into God's hands, knowing that the one power alone is already handling this person's life and their karma perfectly. I'm not asked to do anything here other than to be a part of that service in whatever way God might ask me to be. I'm just here to serve. You know, that is the attitude of heart-based consciousness. I'm just here to serve because I've been freely given so much grace, so much love, so much beauty. All I can do now is give it away. So every moment that we choose to banish from our mind all thoughts of judgment about others, we are sinking deeper into the heart. And you know, a great way to do this, you guys, and you know what? Let's do this as an exercise. Let's do this as a quick exercise. I want everyone to tune in to what I'm saying right now, closing your eyes. And I want to do a little thought experiment with you to see what comes up in you. And this is where real honesty is required. Real humility is needed. Don't let that dirty spiritual ego fake you out that you're not seeing what you're seeing or that you're holier than thou. Oh, I don't feel judgments about this or that person. Be radically honest about any remnant of negative energy that comes up when I say these names. Be aware of any of the slightest contraction in your state of being when I say these names. The barometer we're shooting for is that I could speak out every one of these names and you will feel nothing but peace and expansion in your state of being. You would recognize them as, oh yes, that is also my divine brother or my divine sister. Okay, and I'm not passing any kind of judgment on the names I'm about to list. I'm just doing this as a thought experiment to show you in the collective consciousness, certain people gather a lot of judgments around them, a a lot of perceptions of being evil and whatnot. And so we want to see if those exist in us anywhere. Okay, so turning within and closing our eyes. Just taking a few deep breaths. And again, just notice what reactions come up in your mind. Adolf Hitler. Joe Biden. Klaus Schwab. Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump. Opening your eyes. So let me know in the chat who noticed little remnants of judgmental thoughts, maybe big ones, but even just little ones of, I don't like that person very much. For sure, right? You guys are like, oh yeah. That's okay, no judgment at all, right? We just need to get acquainted with how our mind perceives these beings and go, oh wow, I thought I was free of judgment, but woo, when that name came up, I felt a pretty strong contraction. We have to find those parts of us and forgive them, right? And who are we forgiving? What are we forgiving? What are we saying when we forgive? We're not saying, forgive this evil, horrible person, God. We're saying, I forgive those who lack spiritual insight. I forgive those who lack spiritual awareness. I forgive those who are ignorant of love. I forgive those who cannot see their Christ nature. So in that sense, we're not overlooking a wrong of any kind. We are acknowledging a truth that this person doesn't know who they are. They don't know what truth is, so I cannot hold their actions against them. I can only call them up to a higher awareness of who they are through my forgiveness, through seeing the light in them, regardless of their inability to see it in themselves. I'm going to repeat that. My ability to see the light in someone, regardless of their inability to see it in themselves, is what demonstrates real healing in the world. That is what causes real healing in the world, when we can see all beings as being in the light. Even those who've clearly chosen the negative polarity, they're still our divine brothers and sisters, and they're still playing a part in creation. God doesn't see any need to judge anyone in all of the universe, so neither should we, right? If we want to live from God consciousness. So I'm going to share my screen really quick and read a few quotes to you. This is probably my favorite quote from ACIM on forgiveness. It says, "Forgiveness is unknown in heaven, where the need for it would be inconceivable. However, in this world, forgiveness is a necessary correction for all the mistakes that we have made. To offer forgiveness is the only way for us to have it, for it reflects the law of heaven that giving and receiving are the same. Forgiveness is the means by which we will remember. Through forgiveness, the thinking of the world is reversed. The forgiven world becomes the gate of heaven, because by its mercy we can at last forgive ourselves. Holding no one prisoner to guilt, we become free. Acknowledging Christ in all our brothers, we recognize His presence in ourselves. Forgetting all our misperceptions, and with nothing from the past to hold us back, we can remember God." So here's the most important line in this passage. Holding no one prisoner to guilt, we become free. Acknowledging Christ in all our brothers, we recognize His presence in ourselves. And I think the word all there is very important, that it can be easy to acknowledge the Christ in a saintly looking person, you know? a holy appearing person, a kind person, generous person. It's really hard to see it in the selfish person, in the person we think is being a jerk. But if we can still see it, if we can be in the moment of, I don't know, you're out with friends at a restaurant or a bar hanging out and some drunk guy starts yelling at you, saying profanities. And normally it would trigger the ego to defensiveness, and I'm going to give this guy a piece of my mind, and you drop into that ego consciousness. Instead of doing that, if you can just hold this awareness of this person, this poor brother of mine has lost his way. That's it. It's not like you have to have some grandiose, heart-exploding awareness of someone that just provokes you to ecstasy. That's available and possible, but you don't even need to do that. You just need to not judge. That's it. You just need to scrub out the judgment from your perception of them, and having those compassionate kind of dispositions towards people, those compassionate viewpoints of, my poor brother here has clearly lost his way. Blessings to you, brother. It's all forgiven, all good. That is what actually allows them to have a higher level of consciousness stream into their awareness. Maybe they'll start being a little bit more, aware of their behaviors. Maybe they'll start being a little bit more cognizant of their selfishness and their rudeness, right? If you can return good for evil, you're depolarizing their negative energy. But if you return evil for evil, if they're being a jerk to you and you send some profanities right back, you've increased the negativity of the situation and lowered your own energy in the process. And there's a really interesting passage I love, which I'm also going to share with you here, that Jesus gives his disciples about this in the New Testament. Check this passage out from Matthew 21. It says, "A man had 2 sons, and he came to the first and said, 'Son, go work today in my vineyard.' He answered and said, 'I will not.' But afterward he regretted it and went. Then he came to the second, and he answered and said, 'I go, sir,' but then he did not go." Jesus says, "Which of the 2 sons did the will of his father?" And they said to him, "The first." Jesus said to them, "Assuredly I say to you that tax collectors and harlots enter the kingdom of God before you." Interesting message there, isn't it? That Jesus is saying, those people you judge, the harlots, the tax collectors, they're entering the kingdom before you. Why? Because what God wants is a humble, contrite heart. And so even if someone's sinning, doing drugs, debauchery, degeneracy, whatever, and they eventually turn from their wicked ways and turn their heart to God and say, "God, please forgive me. I got to change. I got to repent from this." God actually favors that and gives grace to that. But if you are not doing the things you're saying, if you're not walking the walk, you say that you believe in unconditional love, you say that you're a devotee, all these things, but then you're judging people in your mind. God is saying those people you judge are closer to the kingdom than you are, because your own judgments are pushing yourself away from the kingdom. What was Jesus' commandment? What was God's commandment? Love thy neighbor as thyself. And so when the father commanded his son, go work in the vineyard, and the son said, "No," and then felt bad about it and went, "I should obey my father," that son had the favor and did the father's will. Whereas the father who commanded his second son, and the son said, "Yes, father, I will do so," and then he went out and did whatever and didn't go to the field, disobeyed his father's will. We do the same whenever we don't love our neighbor as ourselves, because that's the commandment that God has given us all, right? To love thy neighbor as thyself. Jesus said that's the greatest commandment. Love God, love your neighbor. And Jesus, as we know, even rebuked his followers in the New Testament for passing by the widow and the orphan and the hungry man and the thirsty man, the prisoner. Jesus said, when you passed them up, you passed me up. So don't come to me calling me Lord, Lord, when you didn't even see me in the least of these. He's talking about spiritual awareness. And again, only forgiveness can illuminate our spiritual awareness. There's also a Hindu story of this that I've heard that's very similar. It goes something like, and I'm going to screw this up, but there was 2 men who heard that a famous Indian sage was coming into town to give a satsang. And one of the friends said, I can't make it. I got to go down to the whorehouse and hang out with some prostitutes that day. And the other friend said, well, I'm going to go to see the sage because that feels like the right thing to do. And so the two men go their separate ways. One man goes to sit before the sage and have satsang. The other goes to the whorehouse to be with prostitutes. But while he's in the whorehouse with the prostitutes, he becomes overcome with guilt and remorse for not going to see the sage. And while he's sitting there with prostitutes, he's only thinking in his mind, I wish I was there in the ashram listening to the sage. I should be there instead. And counterintuitively, the friend who goes to see the sage is sitting there the whole time thinking about all the fun his friend is having with prostitutes and not actually present with the sage. And it says Krishna gives his grace to the man who went to the prostitutes in that situation. Interesting. Interesting, isn't it? Seems to say that God cares only about the heart, the position of the heart. Where's your heart coming from? It doesn't really matter where you are in time and space. It doesn't really matter the outside things, the external things. What are the inner things? Where's your heart, right? What has your allegiance in this moment? So you could be sitting in a brothel and thinking about God and be closer to the kingdom than someone sitting before a sage thinking about the brothel. Isn't that interesting? All spiritual truths are paradoxes, as we say. The kingdom of heaven is within you was Jesus's classic phrase, yeah? But another one that Jesus says, in I believe Matthew 18, verse 18, which you've probably heard before, is Jesus says, whatsoever you bind on earth is bound in heaven, and whatsoever you loose on earth is loosed in heaven. Now that's interesting because we think about heaven, at least as Christians we did, as a far off place, way up in the clouds, beyond the stars. So whatever I bind on earth, it's bound somewhere way out there in the cosmos, wherever heaven is. It happens there too. I think we're off track there, don't you? I think it's discussing an inner reality, isn't it? If Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is in you, then whatever I bind on earth, the external, is bound in heaven on the internal. Whatever I loose in the external, whatever I loose on earth, is loosed in heaven, the heart. And something about the recognition that the kingdom of heaven really is in my heart, it really is inside of me, then whatever I do to the external, I do to the internal. Can you see that? It's in me. So my judgments, as the Course says, are always attack upon myself and are always a closing of the doors to heaven. So when we see with true spiritual illumination, there is no sin in our awareness. And that happens at the illumination SQ level at the throat chakra. And so how do we get to that level? We go through the heart, right? The heart comes before the throat chakra because the heart cleanses the mind of all unrighteousness, all judgment. So those who forgive are living in the heart. Those who forgive are of pure vision and are seeing reality through the eyes of the heart. And why is that important? Because the heart sees oneness. Only the heart sees oneness. By no other way can we enter into unity consciousness than through heart, through love. Yeah? Seeing with loving awareness is the gateway to heaven. And that gateway can be open at any moment that we choose to see with love. So forgiveness doesn't mean that we go around seeing the sins of others and then forgiving them. Oh gosh, what a horrible person. Okay, God, I forgive them. They're also your child. It might be that at first when we're really, holding on to our judgments, it might feel like we have to actually overlook an evil or a sin. But that's not what true forgiveness really is, right? True forgiveness means we see no sin. We only see ignorance, and we only see suffering. As the Course says, sin in the light of the Holy Spirit is a mistake to be corrected, not an evil to be punished. We recognize everyone's just where they are. They've been conditioned as they've been conditioned. We start to realize that only love is sanity. And so from that, to that extent, the heart shows us that anyone who's acting outside of love, myself included, is insane to that same degree, because only love is true sanity. So if we see an insane person doing something insane, we just accept that as a fact. They just need help. It doesn't rise within us to think about hating them or condemning them in our heart. And that is the same exact disposition that the heart allows us to see of everybody when we access heart-based consciousness. We see everybody like children, truly. It may be hard to imagine this for some of you, and I can appreciate that, because for me at one point it was as well. But man, I can only assure you guys that by practicing forgiveness and really working on, each and every day, like striving to really forgive and see as innocent even the worst people you can think of, is the most cleansing spiritual practice that there is, and the most heart-based practice there is, that will blast open the doors of the heart and immediately put you in touch with heavenly reality. You can immediately start partaking in it when you truly walk with forgiveness in your eyes. So with forgiveness, we can have continual light. And isn't that what we all want? When the heart is activated, we are emitting a higher level of energy, right, from our energy field. That higher level of energy, the fourth density energy, the green ray energy, takes our torus field out wider and farther. The green ray field stretches farther than the yellow ray, or the orange or the yellow. We have these, energy bodies that stretch out increasingly far, right? And the heart chakra energy puts us in touch with our environment in a much deeper way, a more intuitive way, a more intelligent way, a more balanced and harmonious way. So we immediately start feeling happier. We immediately have more available energy to enjoy and express ourselves with. Our frequency rises, right? It's always a gift that we give ourselves. So the last quote I want to read you is from the Law of One, because I love looking at these kind of multiple perspectives. It's from session 34. Dawn says, how do you define karma? Our understanding of karma is that which may be called inertia. Those actions which are put into motion will continue using the ways of balancing until such time as the controlling or higher principle, which you may liken unto your breaking or stopping, is invoked. So that the patterns of karma we create will continue until we stop them. This stoppage of the inertia of action may be called forgiveness. These two concepts are inseparable. So there Ra is saying the only way to pump the brakes on karma or stop the wheel of karma is forgiveness. Then Dawn says, if an entity develops what is called karma in an incarnation, is there then programming that sometimes occurs so that he will experience catalyst that will enable him to get a point of forgiveness, thereby alleviating the karma? So Dawn is asking, if someone has karma, will the universe attract to them an experience that basically forces them to find forgiveness? And Ra says, this is in general correct. However, both self and any involved other self may, at any time through the process of understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness, ameliorate these patterns. This is true at any point in an incarnative pattern. Thus, one who has set in motion an action may forgive itself and never again make that error. This also breaks or stops what you call karma. So another important point there in terms of being the creators of our reality, being conscious creators, forgiveness plays a huge role in that. Because if we're trying to create positive, harmonious realities for ourselves, but holding grievances against people, holding judgmental thoughts, we are attracting karma that must reflect it back to us in some kind of experience. So we're drawing negative experiences to ourselves. And Ra says, at any point, you don't need to wait for life to train wreck you to finally forgive. At any point, you can say, I forgive you, and stop the wheel of karma right there. So forgiveness is also the only thing, and this is a huge point, you guys, forgiveness is the only thing that shortens the soul's need for karmic experience. Can you see that? Your soul has to experience the karma that it's generated and accumulated until or unless forgiveness comes in. And then, whoop, the universe says they don't need that karma anymore. They've alleviated it. They've atoned for it. A Rudolf Steiner book I read recently called How to Gain Knowledge of Higher Worlds. He says in this section, disrespect, antipathy, and underestimation bring about the starvation and withering of perception. For the occultist, this fact is visible in the aura. A soul which harbors the feelings of devotion and reverence brings about a change in its aura. Certain yellowish red or brown red tints will vanish, and tints of bluish red will replace them. And I thought that quote was interesting because in the Law of One, Ra also talks about the auras of different beings and says the same thing, that a third density being or even a negatively polarized entity will have a brownish, reddish, orangish hue to their aura, whereas an enlightened, positively polarized being has a more bluish, greenish, indigo kind of aura. So apparently, this awareness is available to us, tangibly, physically, to actually see this information. And it's amazing, isn't it, how the universe has a natural built-in protection mechanism that only through the way of the heart can we access true telepathy and clairvoyance and clairsentience of the needs and the thoughts and the pain of other people. Because before we enter the heart, we would use that information selfishly, wouldn't we? If we could perceive the thoughts of others, the pain behind their eyes and in their mind, the ego would totally weaponize that knowledge for its own selfish gain. We would use it to abuse people. And so, in the divine intelligence way, it created this kind of barrier that you only gain access to true psychic awareness, where you can actually hear the thoughts of others, feel their pain, know their past, have these intuitive recognitions about them if you're living from the heart. Because from the heart, you only want to use those things to serve people. And so love, as we know, is quantum entanglement. To love someone entangles you with them in unity, literally in consciousness, right? So if you want to know information about people, if you want to pick up words of knowledge about people, the healing they may need, the word of encouragement they may need, you got to first love them unconditionally. Otherwise, if you're seeing them with judgment, you're literally separating yourself from them in your mind, aren't you? And so you won't be able to pick up this kind of information. And just think for a minute how helpful it would be from a service to others perspective if you could actually see the auras of people, like physically. You could see the color spectrum that they're emanating. You could see somebody with a deep brown reddish aura and immediately know, that person needs love today. And you could send them love in your mind, in your heart. You could even go up to them and be kind and loving to them. You could do whatever source intelligence moves you to do, because you're actually tapped into a deeper, a higher world, as Rudolf Steiner would say, where you can perceive the auras of people and know where their state of being is in any moment. That'd be an incredible asset to service, wouldn't it? It's available through forgiveness. So in conclusion, if we desire to leave the shadowlands of ego consciousness and enter heart-based consciousness, we must be always growing in our capacity to love. We must always strive to grow in our capacity to love, because love is the way, the truth, and the life. The awareness of love's presence, as we teach here, is truly the only practice we need. To be aware of the presence of love in every moment is all you need for complete liberation and enlightenment. But it's not so easy to do when you've got an ego mind full of judgment that wants to think separate thoughts about others and attack thoughts. So it wants to obscure that awareness of love's presence. The ego does. And that's what makes forgiveness feel difficult. So by practicing each and every day to walk in forgiveness, innocence towards all beings, seeing all beings as innocent and holy and divine, almost in a sense disregarding their external behaviors. When we learn to walk in that forgiveness, we are polarizing positively, and we are activating the heart chakra tremendously. This is the one most important and powerful way to access the green ray center, is by choosing to forgive and to cease judgments, because only judgments cause the heart to close off, right? So only judgment can keep us truly from living in heart-based consciousness. Only judgment can trap us in the solar plexus and keep us out of that heavenly realm of the heart chakra, where all happiness and bliss and peace and joy is available to us. But we got to earn it. You know, that the ego is like the great gatekeeper of heaven that ensures that no one can pass through unless they've earned entry into heaven through the discipline of walking in forgiveness, forgiving all the world and all sentient beings of their mistakes, and thereby forgiving ourselves as well for everything we've ever done. Only that is crystallization, right? And only that crystallization can come from the heart. So that's where I'll leave you for today. This is just, we're talking about fundamentals a lot lately. And in terms of fundamentals for heart-based consciousness, there's no more important one we can give. And there will be more we can give. But forgiveness, you guys, I'm telling you, it's where the most bang for your buck is. I promise you.